Right, welcome everyone to our March session of the Passive House Alberta Coffee Talks. Today we are talking with Peter Amerongen, who is, I guess, a pioneer of green and sustainable building, working mainly out of Edmonton, although he's probably got houses just about all over Alberta now. And yeah, we'll have a quick chat with him and some questions afterwards. So if you have any questions, write them in the chat, or since there's not that many of us, we can probably just unmute afterwards and have a nice conversation. So I will pass it over to Peter. Take it away.
Oh, okay. Thanks for having me here. I debated about whether to use slides or just talk, but I'm gonna. And this is an interesting project, multifaceted, and I think it's worthwhile to just flash through a bunch of images to kind of focus the conversation. So just in terms of new construction, this is a carbon graph for Edmonton's 1.5 degree scenario. So the area under the curve is how much carbon we can emit and stay within our 1.5 degree budget. And I actually drew this a year and a half or so ago. So it's kind of scary because we haven't made anything like the drop that we need to do. And so at the rate we're going, we're going to have used up our entire carbon budget for 1.5 in about 6 or 7 years. So that's terrifying. And it's the same all over the planet. Buildings are responsible for about 40% of global emissions. And about 70 to 80% of those are already built, of the ones that we'll have in 2050. So we're just like, there's just no avoiding this. There's no path to a decent future without massive deep energy retrofits. And so we were chatting about the Dutch system. Basically, they have done about 5,000 units now. These are simple post-war townhouses. They've got about another 10,000 in the works, and their pilot was 110,000. And they're building big factories to do this. So this is extremely exciting, and everybody, thinking about this is scrambling to try and replicate that. And there are huge advantages to panelized deep energy retrofits. They're in total, to do the same thing, they're less expensive, you get high quality, you get good building science, less disruption to the residents, they're easier to manage, and they look great, and you get a low total cost of ownership. And when you contrast that to incremental, the kind of retrofits that happen with utility incentives and municipal incentives, you end up these are two buildings in our big project right now. One of them needed new siding and got new siding and about a half an inch of insulation. It's not performing any better than its neighbors to speak of, and they spent all this money on new hardy siding, and I'm sure something for the insulation. The contractor told them, well, you don't want to put any more than this half inch because then you got to deal with the windows and that sort of thing. And the windows had been replaced about 20 years ago. So they're sort of marginal as well. And so I live right next to this housing co-op. I lived in it for about 20 years, and my house is the one with the green round metal roof down there, and then the other one that you see on the right is actually the Riverdale Net Zero House, one of the first net zero houses in Alberta, built in 2006 or so. Anyway, these guys have taken a really long view. They were in a situation where they needed to renegotiate their lease and their mortgage, and a lot of the buildings needed serious upgrading, and they thought that they should look into whether they should be doing some insulation upgrades at the same time. And they hired Stuart Fix, my partner in Renew Engineering, and he hired me, and we did some analysis and came up with a plan and a budget that um, uh, it was sort of sitting there. It was somewhere around $5 million, and then we heard about um, Enercan having an R&D fund, and we went after that and got it. And so it's $2.5 million. About 2 million of that was available for construction, and that made it a no-brainer. So that's what we're on to now. It's totally consuming. I mentioned in the earlier that I'd been to Holland, and I I spent all day with a guy from Energy Sprong, and at lunch I showed him these pictures and said, what would you do with those tight jogs? That door that's really jammed in into the little jog, cantilevers, all of that kind of stuff. And he said quite cheerfully, "Oh, for us, that would be a no-go." So Intercam's really earning their money. We've got all kinds of anomalies and problems that we're having to deal with. We've got 7 different unit types and 15 buildings with different mixes of units in them, so different junctions and that kind of stuff. So yeah, so it's a heck of a challenge. We're on our 3rd building right now, just getting ready to start the 4th and 5th. So it starts, with now our process is the very first one we did with a tape measure, and we built the panels on my driveway. But now we're scanning we've scanned the whole co-op with a Leica BLK 360 scanner. That about 55 scans get registered so that you get one file with all the points. And it's about 170 gigabyte file. It's massive. And then the guy who did the scanning and the registration uh, clipped out the building. So we were dealing with like a 5 or 6 gigabyte file. And then we're using a program called Undet, which is a plug-in to SketchUp made in Lithuania. And it enables us to turn rows of points into wall planes. And then once we've got the raw geometry, we know how big the windows are because they're mostly standard and we've measured them all anyway. And so we have a window element that we slide around until we get the best fit on the group of points that look like they're the window. So it's a very nerve-wracking thing. If these panels don't fit, and you've got a crew of 6 or so and a crane, and the siding's on and the windows are in there and they're all nicely taped up with Sega tape and all that kind of stuff, you're hooped, like if it doesn't fit. So we've spent a lot of time on detailing, on fine-tuning our process for getting this geometry, and then turning that into panel drawings that that we send to our panel partners in Killam, Alberta. We actually did the second building without without we built them on site as well. They weren't quite ready to start delivering for us. And so that was actually almost like a second pilot phase for us because we learned a bunch more stuff and refined. After doing the first building, we had a list of 200 things to do better. And now, we're at the sort of 20 and 30 as we go from building to building of kind of improvements. But we really are hoping that by doing this over and over, basically the same thing, that we'll get a lot faster and a lot more affordable. But it's daunting. It's really as our full set of panel drawings kind of looks like that. We give them everything. We show them where to start the WRB. We're all of the laps. They've got, like, every panel has its own drawing, and with four different views. And then we've got a sort of a standard detail set as well that is about another 20 pages. So it's been a huge thing to kind of develop the system, and we're still in it. And so along the foundation, we're using a hydrovac truck to suck about a 6-inch slot around the foundation, and we drop EPS into that, and we're not insulating the floor. We did cost benefit analysis on that, and these units they're 45 years old, and some of the people have been living there for that long, and there's so much stuff. It's just we could never really work inside. Plus, we'd have to redo the basement stairs, and the ceilings are already a little bit on the low side. So this is expensive, but it's less disruption. And then we build we bolt a 2-ply ledger to the foundation and use framing straps to hang this. We call it a box beam. It's not really a box beam, but it's a support box that carries the weight of the panels, and also has to carry porch roofs and decks and anything else that gets reattached to the outside of the building. So the panels are made off-site. The windows are installed, all taped in there and everything. And this is from our first attempt with the off-site panels, and then the exciting day with panels flying around with a crane. And we were, it was an incredible relief. Every single panel fit pretty much perfectly. We had the heights off a little bit. We'd compensated by lowering the windows because we never wanted to have to mess with headers. And now we're going to move them back up a little bit. But by and large, we didn't have to deal with a single tremor, which was a huge triumph as far as our concern. So what it looks like in section is we're adding R50 to the attic. So we'll have about R80. We're getting about having a R value walls with the original, say R15, we're somewhere in the low 40s with the cellulose filled cavity. And then we're about R28 with our support box. So it's and then we're using Duxton fiberglass windows with low E argon, etc. And we on our first, we ended up with we're using an exterior Delta Vent S, or sorry, Vent S. It's not self-adhered though. So it's vapor open, water resistive, and airtight. And we're using that as our primary air barrier. And we went from about 7 air changes an hour down to about 0.7. And we could see in the pressurization that there was some air coming out around the foundation. So the basement is still leaking, and we're not going to be able to do anything much about that. But we've got a whole series of details. And by the way, if anybody's interested in doing this stuff, we're completely open source about all this stuff. And then also a vented rain screen. We have massive numbers of photos. And the windows are inset, trying to get a little better psi install value. And we do a big jam extension on the inside that hopefully doesn't have to mess with too much extra framing. And then we're replacing we're getting tight, so we have to add HRVs, and that involves some laparoscopic installation and we're getting way better at that, and doing less damage to the inside, less repair and painting and all that kind of stuff. And we're also, so once we got the energy needs way down, the question of net zero came up. And originally just had 60 amp service, so there wasn't enough electricity on site to do air source heat pumps. and the utility considered that the system was beyond its useful life. So we ended up resurfacing the entire 2.5 acre site, which was another huge adventure. That we've got that done now. We just got our transformer yesterday, and we should see it being energized fairly soon. But we ended up doing directional drilling and running power along the edges of the building, so we didn't have to do quite so much inside our panel support box. And so we haven't got any of the air source heat pumps in. The ones we've done have their HRVs and still gas furnaces, but we're anxious to get the electricity and abandon the gas quickly, because we're having to work around the chimneys and stuff like that right now, and we'll have to go back and fix that afterwards. So it kind of looks like that schematically. We've got 4 remote sheds, and they're also, the co-op is also doing solar. So the solar will feed back into each of the remote sheds, and it will supply about half the annual energy needed for the co-op, and they're going to buy the rest from some green power provider. So they'll be functionally net zero. Yeah, and then you know all about these things. We're doing air source heat pump water heaters, and so one of the big things we've learned is, you know, it's like we're doing this work with people living in these houses, and some of them are into it and some of them aren't. And we realize we've got to make life better while we're doing it. There's been a huge consultation process. And you know, the people part of it is eating up a lot of time, and it's also rewarding. It's you know, so far it's been going great. There've been a couple people grumble, but for the most part, people are pretty excited about what we're doing and happy about it. And so that's just to flip through the rest of this stuff. So we've also done some deep energy retrofits on single family houses. This was one, you know, and it was really where these details came from, the sort of panelized approach. This is Stuart's house. We did a 90% reduction in his gas bill on this one. And this is one we did for Jesse Tuft from All Weather Windows, who now works for us. That's actually got a 0 gigajoule label. It's one of the first 0 gigajoule retrofits in the country. And we're now working on a 3-house panelized process on some 1950s and 60s houses with some funding from SSRIA. And that's turning out to be using some of the same techniques. So we're going to try and panelize these, use some of the same techniques, and we've got a cool new sort of approach to the digital capture. Logan, in the bottom right-hand corner there, is a grad student in computing science who went back to school after spending a lot of years in the gaming world. He's one of those guys who's just scary brilliant. And he's developed an app where he can take about 13 photos of the house and stitch them together in a 3D model and feed it about 6 in total actual physical measurements, and use that to scale the model, and then get like 3 to 6 millimeter accuracy on the windows on the far side of the house. It's insane. And so we're really, and it's, you know, if you can trust it, it's a lot more positive because you're dealing with high res photos instead of a bunch of points. So and a lot of the interpretation and rectification that we are having to do on the point cloud extraction, the LiDAR, those buildings are not square, they're not level, they're not plumb. You need to have, you know, axes in your drawings to make that work. So we're having to kind of rectify them ourselves, trying not to distort the measurements too much. and where Logan's app should do that. So that's part of our SSRIA funding, is to support him with that a little bit. So one of the things we've realized that from doing this, that we need to do is we need a systematic approach to head people off from doing those piecemeal retrofits. They all think they're doing a wonderful thing for the environment, but in a lot of ways, they're preventing those buildings from ever getting to emissions neutral by sinking money into piecemeal upgrades that don't look after air tightness, that don't integrate the windows with the new air barrier, and that kind of thing, and make difficult, you want to do the walls one year and the roof the next year. Well, you got to knit those together in a way that's tight and thermal bridge free and all that kind of stuff. And so it makes a lot more. So this is I don't expect you to see that, but this is kind of the beginning of a retrofit roadmap that would take people from the I'm sort of curious stage to connecting them to the methodology and resources that they need to do a good job. And so we're also in the process of starting with the funding we've got for the other two projects. We've got an obligation to report and engage, and we've got a website called Retrofit Canada that we're going to use to post the highlights of these projects, and also to invite other projects from across the country so that we can become a kind of a sharing hub of open source information for how to get this done. So that's it. Let's talk.
Okay, actually, I guess thank you for that, Peter. That was excellent. Maybe one more little bit of stuff you can go into before we totally open up some questions is Edmonton's got their HERA program, which is the Home Energy Retrofit Accelerator, and also just in general that their city council has been very, I guess, proactive as far as getting a climate plan that actually has some teeth. So I don't know if you can talk for a few minutes just on kind of how that came to be, if people had to push them there, or if the council moved there by themselves, because like Edmonton's way further ahead than I guess where Calgary and a bunch of other places are, and how we can help the other places get there.
I'm like, definitely we've got a few counselors who get this, who are appropriately terrified of the future. And I don't remember any really active lobbying. Like Don Iveson, the mayor, has been aware of climate change and worried about it for a long time. And I would say he's probably one of the reasons that that this happened. He and this little group of counselors. And so what they did, they started they said we need a citizen advisory committee to tell us what to do. We're not subject matter experts, and it's apparent that we don't have them in the administration as well. There are a few people working in that area. So they found it was called the Edmonton, or the Energy Transition Advisory Committee, and now it's called they realize they need to get some adaptation element, because it's going to demand adaptation as well. So now it's got some big long thing. But anyway, I've been on that committee from day one, and it's really a great committee, and good broad cross section of people, and really good people in the administration who are charged with working with us. And we've actually not had city council like turn down a single one of our recommendations. It's been highly successful. I mean, the people that I'm working with are good communicators. We spend a lot of time. It's a big commitment. But so we sort of package it. And we've also had on our committee And they're the most sort of aware, climate aware of the counselors, and they've really helped us. Um, making sure advice palatable to council to make it stuff that they can act on. So that's like, I don't know how you get that going, but it's really, I think it's been really effective. And now we're uh, we've had, I think we've been going for about 6 years now, and we're looking at a big turnover in council this year. We're losing our amazing mayor, and a number of, like, our two advisor counselors are retiring. So we don't know. We could be down there looking for advice from you. Um, yeah, so that's and here is a, it's better than typical utility programs, but it's not really what we need yet. Like, what we need to is a program where you go, and if you want to just add, 4 inches of insulation in your attic, you need to still do a hot 2000 run, and you get an energy advisor, and get that energy advisor to spin the dials up to a carbon emissions neutral house. You don't have to do that. You can still put your 4 inches of insulation, but you got to know what you're doing before you get the money. And I think that would be a good step. I tried to get the HERA folks to do that, but there's such a long history of developing, or of delivering these kinds of upgrade programs. They're popular politically, that there's a fair amount of inertia in that direction. Plus, they want to get something. They need to have something to show for what they're putting into it. And they'd be far better off, and it would take some analysis to show that. But I think they'd be better off to put more money into fewer upgrades, and make them so you never have to touch that building again.
Thanks for that. All right, I think Leah had a question. If you want to unmute, you can ask that, and then we'll open it to the floor.
Yeah, sorry, the technical nerd in me was kind of curious. So you've panelized all of this system, especially at your subgrade and whatnot. How do you seal those joints? How do you detail in between?
We use we any which way we can. We're like, I'll send you a link to the slides. You can see a lot of we've thought it through. Like, we have actually, what I should do, our standard details really show that more, although
this might be more than what can be held in this particular
yeah. So
yeah.
There's always a flap of that WRB, the delta barrier, that can be taped to its neighbor, whether up, down, or wherever it needs to make a complete seal. So every joint and every intersection has kind of been thought out. We actually use a lot of acoustical sealant in some places where, rather than tape, it's faster and cheaper. And we'll just put a wood batten over it. So squish strip, we call it, if especially if the joint is vertical. And we're using the Delta S Plus, Delta Vent S Plus. It's got, and it's hugely vapor open. It's like, but it's got a pre-glued strip to it. So the top of every roll and the bottom of the one that comes over it has got a glued thing. So you just have to roll that together. So that's what happens in the middle of the panel. But when we're joining them together, if we can't use that because of just material use, we'll use acoustical usually, and then press it together. And we've got a little experiment that I've had outside my garage for about 2 years now. They say you've got to cover this stuff within 3 months or something, and I wanted to test it and just see whether the acoustical seal would eat it. But it's 2 years old now, and no degradation from either the sun or rain or anything.
No, I tend to see that sort of at the 5 and 10 year mark when we're dealing with that, but interesting.
Well, the thing that scared me was that the original, when people started using acoustical sealant, which is really designed for acoustics, for sealing poly, because it was something that would never harden, they found that the solvent in it ate the poly. So that's why we have CGSB poly now that is resistant to that. So that would be my concern, is whether the solvent in the acoustical would have any impact.
I was talking to a junior envelope engineer here in Calgary who was looking into research about the problem with acoustical sealant, actually, because it never dries. They're finding it actually flows down a wall over time.
Well, and in the heat, that's going to compound that problem a lot.
Mm-hmm.
My other concern at sealing joints with sealant, being a building envelope nerd myself, is, you know, any either movement, or if you've got racking issues, or thermal cycling pulls that joint open over time.
These are all mechanically adhered, and there's a bit of stretchiness in the material, so I'm not worried about that at all. And I would think it would be that's the, you wouldn't get enough movement to break the delta vent material, or you'd have other problems.
No, it's more sealant joints that I would be worried
Yeah.
about.
Well, we never just leave it like with acoustical. It's always got, it's always mechanically fastened between two elements of the building, the sheathing on the back and the batten strip.
It's good practice with that stuff anyway, right? So.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, that's like, I've been air sealing buildings since 1976, and we didn't have tapes in those days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you've got really amazing results out of poly in the past. I've been tracking that, and so what the heck, there's air barriers, and then there's air barriers, and sometimes simple is better.
So just we also have moisture sensors in the walls in our pilot. So we've just collected a winter's full of worth of data. So we need to go back and look at that and see what it's looking like. Because these things at 7 or 8 air change, or 6 or 7 air changes an hour previously have pretty crappy vapor barriers. And when we've installed extra windows and stuff like that, I mean, there's no poly behind the tubs. And, this was done in 76 when carpenters were still bitching about having to, what is this stupid poly stuff for?
Okay, anyone else got another question? If not, I have maybe one or two other ones.
So Peter, thanks for being here. Appreciate that. I'm Richard. I'm a realtor, and I can appreciate the whole idea of the carbon and the global emissions and all that kind of stuff. Just from my perspective, talking with clients, they have no care about that at all. The whole carbon, this and that and the other thing is just another reason for Trudeau to tax us. So for most people out there in the marketplace, it is all about the price. So my question, I did email it in. Frank's probably got it on his list. Just what's the most cost-effective way for us to do this? And as I said, I'm a realtor. I'm dealing with people buying homes, and it seems to me, your comments even at the beginning, it's way easier to do this right from the get-go, building a new home rather than a retrofit.
Totally, but and like, it's not fair. So I get that your clients are not interested in carbon. I mean, ultimately they're going to be interested in survival, and that's where we're headed in a not too distant future. Like, this is an emergency, so we're all on a journey. They're not there yet. They don't understand that they might stick their heads in the sand forever. Some people will, but ultimately you can't avoid this. those graphs at the beginning, these are survival issues. And the more I work in this, the more freaked out I get, because it's so hard to make the kind of impact that we need to make. And it's not a, you know, like, I'm not passionate about this. I really wish I didn't have to do this. I'm 74 years old. I should be happily retired, enjoying a beach somewhere. But it really, you know, if those of us who know how to do it don't do it, we're totally screwed. We have no time to do this. It's dicey whether it's gonna work or not. So I don't know what to say to your clients other than, you know, do a little reading, talk to your kids, whatever. It's
So, but to
ultimately,
just bring you back to my question,
yeah, okay, so it's expensive, and a simple, it won't have a simple payback, but I think that you can show, especially with $175 a ton carbon tax, that the long-term total cost of ownership, when you look at the fact that we're replacing a building envelope skin that needed replacing anyway, and that's the expensive part. Like, the insulation is not the expensive part, and ultimately there are tens of thousands of buildings that need new windows, need new siding, need new roofing, and that kind of work already. Those are the ones where we should be concentrating, is the older ones that are in crappy shape. And then you look at, you're going to improve the resale value. Not only will you be able to appeal to a segment of the market, because there is one that will appreciate the fact that they can look their kids in the eye, but also you're giving them a house that's got a higher resale value, and one that won't need, because it's got a rain screen and been detailed very carefully and for durability, won't need to be touched for another 50 years, except for very minor maintenance. So there's value there, and making up that backlog of information. So when you put it into a total cost of ownership model, it makes a lot more sense.
so I guess though, more specifically, my question is, of all the building strategies, the different ways of doing this, what's the least expensive? What's the most cost-effective way to do this?
I think, and these are early days. We're still trying to figure out, this is a research project, what our costs really are. Ultimately, some version of this, I think, will be cheaper if you're going to the same place. If you want to do just, if you don't care about the energy costs, then, just changing the windows and the siding will probably do it. And maybe a little insulation while you're at it.
So that though is contrary. So, I'm thinking young family, hey, we don't want a $350 monthly bill from, all our utilities. We want it to be low cost monthly. How do we get that in the most affordable way?
Well,
so a net zero or something like that, the most affordable way.
It's gonna vary on a case-by-case basis, and that's really why we are advocating for this retrofit roadmap. Is basically part of that is a kind of a, our vision of this thing is that, we collect case studies from across the country, including their costs and their total cost of ownership analysis. And so you're buying a 1970s house over in this neighborhood here, and you look in the gallery and you see, oh, okay, I got a house like that. They spent $90,000, and now they're and here's what their total cost of ownership looks like. That makes sense. I could do that. And so now, then you go to the next branch in the road where you say, okay, well, how do I take this further? Well, you get a energy audit done, you get connected with contractors who do this stuff, and and then eventually you get, you do it. But you can find out just on a website on a Tuesday night whether it's something you could afford to think about or not. And ultimately, as a country and a civilization, we're going to have to figure out how to do this. And hopefully, as we do more and more of them, we'll find more solutions for each house type, and be able to sort of dial in on that lowest cost of ownership and the right compromise. But it's a big, complicated set of, and I totally get why people do that. Oh shit, I think I'll just add 2 inches of insulation in the attic, even though it's going to not do anything for airtightness and make it harder to get it airtight ever. And so but there's a whole, there's a whole industry to build here.
Hey, Peter, how are you? Oscar here.
How's it going?
How's it going?
Yeah.
Peter, question for you. On that road, you have an idea of a go, a no-go for a project? That let's say that this one really should be built new instead of doing the retrofit?
Well, like it's a moving target. So, and I was about to complain about carbon a minute ago, but when you look at, so the entire building industry now is scrambling to start to take into account embodied carbon, because if you think about the carbon from a construction point of view, and Bill Gates had a piece in the Globe and Mail a couple of weeks ago that used an interesting analogy. So carbon in the atmosphere is like water in a bathtub. We've got a constant flow of water in there, no outflow. Eventually we're going to overflow the tub. And the rate that we are flowing, like cranking the tap back, will give us a little more time, but ultimately we need to turn it off or we're screwed. So it used to be that the old rule of thumb was that a building used about 10% of its carbon in construction and about 90% in operation. Well, now we've got that operation part down to about 10% of what it was, and we can meet it with renewable energy, but that original 10% is gone on day one. From concrete, from steel, from all the construction materials, the construction heaters, all of that kind of stuff is in that tub with one big dump on day one, never to be brought out in anybody's lifetime. And so you'll see the foam manufacturers are going crazy to try and get their blowing agent impacts down. The concrete industry is turning itself inside out, trying to figure out low carbon concrete. And when you look at the difference between building new and building a retrofit, the retrofit is so much better, uses so much less concrete. It's reusing that existing concrete and all of the other materials that went into the house, and the plumbing, the copper, all of that kind of stuff. So it's way, way cheaper. And the other, so if it's at all salvageable, it probably makes more sense to retrofit. And the other thing that's happening, and I don't know if Richard, you're seeing this, but we're seeing, and we did a lot of infill. Infill's gotten very expensive. Lots of people, families now are saying, you know what, I could actually live in that bungalow that my parents raised 5 kids in, that's now 5 minutes from downtown. I don't need the McMansion on the new lot. I don't want to drive that far. And I want to, walk to the coffee shop and all that kind of stuff. So those houses have got another life ahead of them as carbon neutral houses. I think, like, we're seeing a lot of tear downs, but we're also now, like, my partner Dave Butterwick has just run off his feet doing deep energy retrofits to single family houses. So yeah, no, I mean, it was hard enough, as you know, getting the operational carbon down. And then when you have to start thinking about the construction carbon as well, it's like, it's not fair.
Yeah, thank you.
And honestly, your comment about it being an issue of survival, most young families, I'm just thinking about surviving the next couple of years. I need a house for my kids to live up, close to work, close to a good school, all that kind of stuff. So.
Well, yeah, no, I get that. I mean,
I do get it.
I was there too, and I totally get that. And, you know, we're not, we didn't evolve, you know, just get away from that tiger and you'll be fine. Like that's really is the length we think about it. But we're driving the bus off the cliff. We can't think like that much longer, or it's going to be, it's already pretty close to too late, but it's going to be a lot worse if we don't do what we can.
Yeah,
And
I think that people is also afraid sometimes of what is coming on a renovation work. Like again, I live in a 1920 bungalow, something like that, that has been upgraded little by little over the years, but we kind of are always very cautious of where to go, what to do, because the last time that we did a reno, we discovered that there were no sewer pipes. They were just almost powder at some point. So it's like, okay, we need to fix
well,
all of that and things like that. So I think that's the
better to
scary
mess
part.
up the yard once, huh?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's the other thing is like every time you get something done on a house, you're paying some guy to come out and price it and um, make the arrangements to get your material and stuff like that. And you pay every every visit that a tradesperson comes to the house, you pay them to drive there and set up their tools and stuff like that. The more you can get done from every one of those visits, the cheaper in total it's going to be.
Yeah, yeah, and I like the idea of having just a plan because that's the thing that we always see. Okay, we need to replace the roof, but we don't do anything else, or the windows, and
Yeah,
that's it. We
and
stop there.
you know, it's just you know, there's an interesting book going around by called A Good War that compares the kind of effort we need for climate survival with the kind of effort that went into fighting the Second World War. And it's really that scale of mobilization that we need. And it's doable. It's totally doable. But we just need to get those parents thinking beyond the first few years of their kids' school and about what those kids are their lives are going to be like. And their own lives.
I honestly, I honestly think you're fighting the war the wrong way.
Really?
It's just not going to happen,
How would you do it?
right?
How would you do it?
Well, we have to figure out how to get the costs down. That's the absolute primary thing. And
So if it's not cost effective to save the planet, are we just gonna screw it? Let her go?
You know, I think that and I've seen it, we have been doing some models right now, and what happens is that we don't pay for energy what we should. Once the cost of that, what we really consume, it goes up, and we need to be paying what we should be paying. All of these things will be nonsense. And you see the adaptation of many jurisdictions to things like the passive house, it goes hand to hand when it costs a lot of money for utilities. So the Alberta thing is that we kind of have the energy for free, in my opinion. And we need to start changing that thing. And hopefully, even though most people don't like it or something like a carbon tax, it's probably gonna do the job.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the people who really want market solutions should be the strongest advocates of a carbon tax. Because you know, why should it be allowed to wreck the planet just to maintain your lifestyle?
Richard, there's a couple of things going on. One thing is that people are really used to looking at the sticker price and really unused to asking questions about long-term financial health. You know, everybody goes, but gas is cheap here. I mean, natural gas, right? Gas for heating. So why do I have to worry about it? Well, I don't know if you remember, but I certainly remember the winter of 2002, where all of a sudden we were paying between $20 and $24 a gigajoule for natural gas. Do you remember that? That was the year the conversation changed for a lot of people in Alberta. Right now, the Assessment Authority of Alberta, as far as I know, unless something has happened in the last few months I'm not aware of, they still do not assign value for the purposes of mortgage appraisals to energy efficiency improvements, because their ideas, somehow people don't care. But how many people, if you're trying to sell them an old house, how many people, like there's a question directly to the real estate industry, how many people ask, how about those windows? How about that furnace? You know, what the insulation, is there any insulation in the walls?
Yep, Peter,
Yeah.
in that question, and in Edmonton with the energy labeling, is that a motivation for going retrofits and things like that? And it will add value to a property, or what do you think?
I think we're kind of there's a subset of people for whom that will be a motivator. And you know, right now there isn't the capacity to do this. We're plenty busy appealing to that subset and serving them. And so the hope is that as we get better at this and more of them happen, and there's more support from government agencies and that kind of thing, and the carbon tax gets higher, that you know, these things will converge, so the capacity and the interest will grow together.
Quick
I'm going
comment.
to interrupt you guys because I have to leave right away. So my one comment about all of the talk about money and financing is that we're all in the wrong business. We're all kind of on the same, we're on the same page as Peter, and we're all sold on doing this. But what we really need is financing that makes sense. So when the question is, can I afford to replace these windows? Somebody's going to lend you money so that you can actually do that and not feel it in your pocketbook today. You don't need to think about this too deeply. You don't need to be passionate about it. It's just going to make you can make your mortgage payments and everything makes sense. As soon as you're asking people to fork out a lot of money for something that is happening in theory, they're not going to do it. This is a world where you have to sell people on wearing face masks so they don't get sick and kill their grandparents. So logic doesn't necessarily work. I think we need to be thinking about the financing of this and how that can make sense to people in a very, very basic way. I have to run. You guys are awesome.
Hi, Kim.
Thanks, Kim. I would also add a comment here.
Okay.
You know, I recently was in a show home and noticed that there were the windows were double pane windows. And this is a brand new house. And I said to the sales rep that was there, I said, did you know that this would be illegal in some countries in Europe? And he was like, what are you talking about? And it's my understanding that in some countries in Europe, you have to have triple glazed windows. And so that's one thing that I think we could do as far as changing government policies. And I'm not at all in favor of a carbon tax. I'll put my hand up right now and say that. But I think there are some other things that governments can do to incentivize us. Let me just finish, Peter. Hang on a second. So in BC, I think in our last meeting, someone mentioned that if you're building a passive house, and maybe it was a net zero house as well, then there was some extra benefit that you got. You could build the home bigger on the lot or something like that. There were some government incentives to make it a little bit easier to make people want to buy a high efficiency home. I think that's where we need to go, along with the education thing.
Are you willing to pay more taxes so that the government can afford those subsidies?
No subsidy, right? If you say, hey, here's a lot, you're going to buy the lot anyway, you're going to build a house on that lot. Well, now, because you're going to make it a passive house, we're going to allow you to make it a little bit bigger. There's no subsidy for that.
That'll work a little bit. Now they're spending even more money. So let me ask you a question. Why should we pay for municipal garbage service? Like, why couldn't we just, why do you demand that I pay property tax to have my garbage taken away?
Yeah, you're right, Peter. We should just all burn it in our backyards. Is that what you mean?
Sure, it's cheaper. Save all that money. Why not? What's the
Of
difference?
course, there's things that we do that we cooperate together because there's efficiencies of scale, right?
And that is exactly where a carbon tax comes in. It's exactly the same thing. We can't just destroy the planet. It's just a bigger neighborhood. That's the only difference.
Okay, Peter, can you tell me what other tax we can stop? Please, the
It-
burden of taxes is overwhelming right now.
No, it's not overwhelming. We're paying some
Yeah,
of
it
the
is.
taxes. We're not paying anywhere near the taxes we paid in the 50s.
Where do you live? You don't live in Calgary, obviously.
I live in Edmonton, and the income tax rates in the 50s and 60s were way higher. We had enormous growth, and nobody was bitching.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I
Sorry,
think we
it
might,
seems like
yeah. I think we might kind of bring it back to back onto the topic. So I guess one of the options I've thought about, Richard, is when you buy a new house, that is the best time to say do air barrier, which is one of the simpler ways to bring down the air tightness, and the cost is much less when you don't have to move material in or out. So that's a good thing you can use to sell to new people. Having the EnerGuide rating on a house, or just having doing the EnerGuide ratings when you buy a new house and having that plan is also one of the best things to do. And hopefully the government will be offering a bunch of those EnerGuide ratings fairly soon. Obviously, you don't necessarily get all the way to passive house, but you can. At least you know where you're starting, and then you can start building out the pathway to your net zero or whatever your goals happen to be. I guess, is there anyone else that had some other questions for Peter, or a different topic genre we want to go down?
No, but if you're ever doing work in Calgary, please let me be a part of it because I would love to.
Yeah, well, there is a number of us. It was actually a group of us that were trying to do get some similar SSRA funding to do some deep energy retrofits. We weren't successful initially, but there is a number of people that are doing in Calgary, and hopefully the $5,000 federal credit or grant that should be coming out later this year will help start the process, at least gets the energy audits done, and yeah, starts the process.
I mean, I would consider it if even only to deal with this leaky 74 bungalow I live in. It would be such an excellent building science experiment for me to do and then move forward. But again, I understand the cost thing, but yeah, it's a whole different issue. Well,
But Peter, where is the beach that you want to spend the rest of your days?
I beg your pardon?
The beach. You said that you want to go to.
No, I'm not that. I'd rather go cross country skiing in Edmonton in February when the sun is shining than be on any beach anywhere in the world. But that's
Damn it, because I really want to be on your projects near a beach as well.
Yeah.
do we know if there's any movement in Calgary at all with regards to folks advocating for this change? Yeah, you're doing that, Kevin? Yeah, and Celia.
definitely.
Okay, cool. It's
There's-
just
there's
I'm
a lot
slowly
of-
sending fingers out into passive house and this, that, the next thing, and there's a lot happening. You just don't catch it on the surface. You got to get under the current. I'm discovering.
That's right. No, please be in touch. Frank, as he was saying, he was involved in a project with a couple of different contractors, with Tyler Hermanson from 4 Elements and himself, to look at best technology going forward. Jump in and tell me to shut up if you want to, Frank. But anyway, in terms of figuring out what would be the most affordable, most effective way of doing retrofits, I'm
Yeah.
working with a partner to develop a company to do it. There's lots of activity bubbling in the background. I've got a decent number of requests for quotes for people to do retrofits. I'll be reaching out definitely to Oscar and Frank and others, just saying, hey, how are we going to go about this? So there's a lot of activity, right? There's a huge awareness in the marketplace in all over Alberta, I think around North America, that this is necessary, and that and there's a huge amount of development happening. The really good thing is that and it's hats off to Peter saying, look, open source, let's get this going. This is an imperative. So it's great. What's happening is really, really good.
So I know Tyler deals with this. There's another gentleman in this neck of the woods. Can't remember his name off the top of my head. At any rate, I have been pursuing, because I started my own company, I stepped away. Now I'm doing my own building envelope work, but also have been looking into expanding into energy advisor. And I'm I'm assuming this will fit into where we want to go sort of logistically. Is it
That's a
something, do you
really,
think it's going to help?
really powerful combination, I think.
Yep, definitely.
Building envelope and energy advisor, like that's one of the things that's missing. We need people who can do both, because there are
It's just been looking into honestly getting the training sorted out. I've been in contact with CMHC and they're like, well, you know, we don't really have anything sort of running. And then locally, I know there's maybe Tyler, but I mean, is there a course? Can I sign up?
Tyler teaches, he trains EAs across the country.
Okay, then I have his contact info. I may just jump on him then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, Stephen Downs was the other one. Have you ever dealt with him?
Yep, I talk to him now and then. Yeah, there's definitely ways. And as part of this rollout of the $5,000 federal grant, they need to, I think, or they're planning to train, I think it's either 1,500 or 15,000 energy auditors, because they realize that that's a missing niche. So, and also you can combine that now with the Alberta Job Grant. So even now as a sole proprietary owner, you can get, I think it's 66% of your training covered to go get basically whatever training you want. It's pretty vague. So
what's it called?
Send me a link and or make friends with me on LinkedIn, and it's there. But if you search Alberta Job Training Grant, it should come up. It just recently changed to allow people that are the sole proprietorships or owners of companies to get training. Before it was just employees. So
Okay.
it's
This would be good then, because this is something I want to pursue. You're right. I think it would marry well. So, and now is the cusp.
Yeah. NG auditors are going to be very busy, probably by the end of this year. Exactly when, we're not sure.
And Leah, you know, other practical skills as well. So I don't know what your background is, what you've got in terms of training, but the EA is a good idea. You know,
Do you know Randy Smith?
Pardon me?
Do you know Randy Smith?
No.
Oh, okay. If you do, anyways, I worked with him for 15 years.
Okay.
So
Are you an envelope engineer or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Randy's one of the best envelope engineers in Alberta.
yeah.
There you
And
go.
then he went off and moved to Kelowna and Jerk. So
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I'm on my own now. Essentially, I'm still in contact with him though, which is nice. So it's a resource I still have.
All these old people retiring when they deserve to. So.
Yeah.
Post your emails in the chat so we can save the chat, and then we've got contact info, right?
Yeah, I will. I'll do that right now. Thank you.
So Peter, what do you figure what's the biggest challenge going forward?
I don't know. I'm a little overwhelmed by it all. Like there are so many, so many avenues to chase down. We think like the retrofitting thing is probably the biggest. Like it's hard. Like I've been in the business for 50 years, and this is the hardest thing I've ever done. And I've got an amazing team. Like I can't. Every day I'm so thankful to these guys. They get air tightness. They understand, good construction and building science, and they're cheerful. They fast, work hard. I just love these guys, and I don't know what I'd be doing if I had to worry about that part of the job too. Like I'm just scrambling, keeping up with these guys with drawings so I don't know, like scaling it for sure. Training people is a big deal. And then simultaneously building the market, getting past the first cost barrier and driving the cost down, getting more efficient, because the margins on this job are tight to non-existent. And it's discouraging, like getting more efficient, finding better ways, finding that optimum. It's a huge challenge.
I guess to the funding that Kim also brought up, has the PACE pilot program in Edmonton actually started to accept applicants yet?
I think it has. I don't know. I don't know its status. Like just some days I'm kind of hanging on by my fingernails and not not much chance to kind of check out interesting stuff.
Yeah, I know Canmore is also trying to get theirs off and running, and I'm seeing now that Federation of Municipalities or something like that is offering additional grants to help you the seed funding for the first rounds of pacing, and then hopefully we can move it over to private funding
Totally.
after that.
Yeah, yeah.
Peter, this isn't a retrofit question, but I seem to recall there were 3 homes built in Edmonton side by side, and they used 3 different types of heating systems. I think one was solar panels with electric baseboard heaters. One might have been HRV. Another one might have been the underground heat pump. Do you recall? Do you know the properties I'm talking about?
I think I do. I helped with one of those houses. We were gonna actually, that was Kevin Taft's. He was a former Liberal leader, actually. So yeah, I don't, nothing groundbreaking in any of them. It wasn't kind of scientifically compared or anything like that, but just on the HRV thing, so they would all have had HRVs. Like as soon as you tighten up the house, you have to have an HRV, and it pays for itself quite quickly. You need to have fresh air.
I guess I was just wondering of the different methods for heating, which one was the most efficient was going to be my question.
Okay, so the thermal system by far would be the most efficient. If you take a typical natural gas, anything, the best you can get is about 95% efficiency. So for every unit of energy in that gas, you can turn about 95% of it into useful heat. With the geothermal system in Alberta, you can get anywhere from 3.5 to 4.5 units of heat for every unit of electricity you put into it. It's got a higher upfront cost, but it by far is the most efficient. It's 400% efficient, but because of the fuel cost difference, it's slightly cheaper to operate than natural gas even, but the capital cost payback would be fairly long. It's there for sure. And then the other one would be air source heat pumps, which take, minus 20 air and turn it into heat inside, and they're about 200% efficient over the season. So they're cheaper. That's what we're doing a lot in our really low carbon houses. Like most of our net zero houses have actually got those. And that's what we're doing at the Sundance Co-op here. We're putting in 59 of these things. So we're saving $38,000 a year by not having 59 gas meters.
I'm sure ATCO loves you.
Yeah, they don't quite get it yet. They've been really nice and polite and cooperative so far. Yeah. But
Clients love them even more with that savings, Richard.
I want to mention something. I'm just a homeowner who's interested in passive house and carbon drawdown and things like that. I think we're on the cusp of the transition. We can't be talking about retrofitting 2,000 square foot homes using oil and plastics. I think it's time to start thinking about increasing density, decreasing the size of residences, and building them with biodegradable materials in a completely different way. The kind of knowledge we're accumulating right now about how to do that and what the reality is really important. We're in a growth phase for knowledge. But when things collapse, it'll be appropriate to have really low-tech solutions. Because when the solar panels are done and when the heat pump is broken, I don't really know who's going to be fixing these things. When this pandemic started, you couldn't buy a freezer. When things go south, all this stuff that's made in China and Mexico and in the States, who's going to fix all this technology for us?
Well, that's a good question. I think we have to, and you know, and passive houses moves in that direction because you don't need much heat, so you've got a little longer before you can get it fixed. And you know, carbon is in the equation. We are simplifying to some degree, but you know, getting people to see it the way we do is going to be a challenge, and they want to see the numbers before they're going to go there today. And I don't I think the steps we're taking are kind of generally in alignment with that path, although we are relying on Japanese heat pumps for sure. I just, we can't afford, we're putting so much money into it already. We can't afford to go to the super dead simple solution where we would have maybe twice as much insulation and get by with an electric element or a candle. So you got to kind of, you know, part of it is our choice to live in this nice frozen climate, but those are big questions. And
I think, Heidi, you know, wherever there's an entrepreneurial spirit, if something is broken and it needs to be fixed, somebody's going to be available to do that. Peter, I've got a question for you about straw bale homes. It's not sort of a retrofit question, but what's your perspective on straw bale homes? They've been around. It's a proven technology. I've seen guys doing the super bales, the big 3 foot by 4 foot by 8 foot bales. It seems like that would be, I mean, it's so sustainable, right? Every year we get new crops.
No, it's great. And like you know, I've built a straw bale chicken coop once. And I'm an old hippie from the 70s. And so we did all kinds of stuff. We did domes and straw bales, and I did timber frame for a while. But you know, you're just never going to get never going to be able to manage the density that we need to keep your, you know, we could all have straw bale houses, but we'd need to buy, you know, we'd be driving because we'd be spread out over a bigger area. Like you know, even with our 12-inch double wall, we're constrained on these narrow urban lots. So it's a space issue. It's also a training and quality control issue. Like if you've got a problem with like I think I could build a super durable straw bale house, but if you've got some problems there and you get some moisture ingress, you've got a recipe for straw soup that's not going to be very load bearing. And I know there are people there are ways to do that, but it takes a really high level of conscientiousness and craftsmanship to make it durable. So I just, like, I love it. I love the very sort of hobbity kind of feel of it and the thick walls and all that kind of stuff. I just don't think it's going to give us, whoops, sorry. I don't think we're going to get the numbers that we need to have. Like my colleagues at this nascent Retrofit Canada tell me that we have to do 20 million retrofits in Canada before I can retire. So it's going to go a lot faster if we do something besides straw bale.
Yeah, and I guess the nice thing to that is dense packed cellulose is not far off of the carbon storage capabilities of straw bale. But the places like the people like the EcoCore and other people doing prefabricated straw or chopped straw walls do definitely as a way to address those performance and quality control issues that Peter talked about. It is definitely coming. Yeah, we need all the different ways to use more waste materials better and store the carbon. All right. Well, we are past the 1 hour, so I don't know if Peter, if you have a phone call that you need to run off to. Maybe if there's 1 or 2 more questions, we'll let them come out, and if not, we will let you guys go till the next one.
Pretty quick here. I'd be happy to to respond, if there's some way to do reply all by email, but I got to be at someplace out in the West End by 2:00, and it's a
Okay, yeah, so I guess if there's any more
Thank you,
questions.
Peter.
Yeah, thank you very much. If there's any more questions, you can always
Thank
send them
you.
in to
Fun. Yeah, no, it's
info@PassiveHouse
really-
Alberta.
Thanks for the questions. Always thought-provoking, and good to kind of think along those paths. So thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you all. Have a good
Thank you,
day.
everyone. Bye-bye.